It's a warm evening at Ed's Diner, a small, cozy spot nestled in the heart of the city. The lights are slightly dim, creating a soft glow that warms the faces of customers, each sitting at their tables, absorbed in quiet conversation or simply enjoying a good meal. The smell of freshly brewed coffee and sizzling bacon fills the air, blending with the murmur of voices and the clatter of plates. The walls are lined with framed photos from the past, snapshots of a time when the diner first opened, giving the place a comforting, nostalgic feel. Behind the counter, weaving through tables with grace and speed, is Maya, a young black waitress. She's got a gentle smile that seems to put everyone at ease, and there's a kindness in her eyes that never fades, even after a long shift. Her uniform is neatly pressed, and she carries herself with a quiet confidence that shows she takes pride in her work. Maya greets each customer warmly, calling many of them by name, and they respond with friendly smiles and kind words. She's a familiar face in the diner, known for her genuine warmth and the little extra effort she puts into making everyone feel at home. "Hey, Mr. Johnson, the usual?" she asks an elderly man at the counter with a twinkle in her eye. He chuckles, nodding, and watches as she quickly jots down his order, her pen moving with practiced speed. In between taking orders and delivering plates, Maya occasionally stops to chat with customers, sharing a laugh here and a quick story there. She's the kind of person who seems to carry a natural light with her, brightening even the dullest days. But beneath that bright smile and easy laughter, there's a quiet strength. Life hasn't always been kind, but Maya's heart remains open and resilient, her spirit unbroken. Yet tonight, something feels a little different. The diner is busy, yes, but there's a heaviness hanging in the air, an unspoken tension waiting to unfold. Maya doesn't know it yet, but she's about to face a challenge, a test of her grace and strength, one that will reveal the heart and character beneath her calm, kind exterior. Just as Maya finishes serving a group of regulars at the far end of the diner, the door swings open, and in walks a man with an unmistakable presence. Dressed in his police uniform, Officer Mark, tall and broad-shouldered, strides in with a sense of authority that's hard to ignore. His gaze sweeps across the room, landing on each person as if he's scanning for potential trouble. People seem to shift uncomfortably, lowering their voices, casting quick glances his way. The warmth that usually fills Ed's diner seems to cool, the friendly murmur of voices dipping a notch. Officer Mark takes a seat at the counter, and Maya approaches him, her professional smile in place. "Good evening, officer. What can I get for you tonight?" she asks, her tone polite yet friendly. He barely glances at her, his eyes cold and dismissive. "Coffee, black," he says shortly, as though even the simple act of ordering is beneath him. Maya nods, moving to pour his coffee, but before she can set it down, he speaks again, this time with a slight sneer. "Been here long?" he asks, giving her a look that's more critical than curious. "Yes, I've been here a few years now," Maya replies, her voice steady. She doesn't let his tone ruffle her, keeping her focus on providing good service, just as she does with every customer. "Thought so," he mutters, taking a sip of his coffee. "Seems like some people are just meant to stay in places like this. Guess it's easy money if you're willing to settle." His words hang in the air, sharp and dismissive, and there's a flicker of something in Maya's eyes, a hint of hurt, quickly masked by a calm smile. Other customers start to notice, shifting uncomfortably as they watch this interaction. Maya, ever the professional, chooses not to react, keeping her expression steady. But inside, each word from Officer Mark feels like a tiny sting. She's used to subtle jabs and dismissive looks, but this feels harsher, more deliberate. As she walks away to tend to another table, Mark smirks, sipping his coffee with a smug satisfaction, as if he's just made some kind of point. To him, she's just a waitress, someone with no ambition or dreams, just another face he'll forget by the time he leaves. Little does he know, Maya is much more than meets the eye. As Officer Mark settles in, he picks up the menu, scanning it with a look of mild distaste, as if even the options themselves somehow aren't up to his standards. Maya returns to him, ready to take his order with her usual calm demeanor. "I'll take a burger, no onions, and don't mess it up," he adds, glancing up at her with a faint smirk, his tone dripping with condescension. I can't stand when people don't pay attention to simple instructions. Maya nods, unfazed on the outside, but a hint of tension tugs at her smile. Of course, sir. I'll make sure it's just the way you like it. As she heads to the kitchen to place his order, Officer Mark leans back, eyeing her with a dismissive curiosity, almost like she's an exhibit in a museum he finds unimpressive. He mutters under his breath, though loud enough for nearby customers to hear, "Just another waitress, wasting her life in a place like this. Probably thinks she's got it all figured out." A few customers glance over, uncomfortable with his words, but Maya, sensing their unease, maintains her professionalism, brushing off the hurt his words bring. She has learned to keep her feelings in check, to shield herself from the sting of judgment and prejudice. After all, people often see only what they want to see, and for Officer Mark, she is nothing more than the job she holds. When Maya returns with his burger, she places it in front of him, her posture steady and respectful. But the moment he takes a bite, he frowns, glaring up at her. "Are you kidding me?" he snaps, his voice loud enough for the whole diner to hear. "I said no onions. How hard is that to understand?" Maya's cheeks flush slightly, and she apologizes sincerely. "I'm so sorry, sir. I'll get a fresh one made for you right away." As she picks up the plate, Mark sneers. "Guess attention to detail isn't your strong suit, huh?" Figures his words slice through the air, carrying an extra edge, meant to demean and belittle. To him, she is just a waitress, just a face in the background, someone who doesn't matter beyond his dinner order. Maya holds back the surge of emotions, taking a deep breath as she walks back to the kitchen. Her mind races with thoughts of all she's been through, all the struggles and sacrifices she's made to get to this point in life. She doesn't need validation from someone like him, but that doesn't mean the words don't hurt. Back in the kitchen, she quickly asks the cook to make another burger, this time without onions. She waits, steadying herself, reminding herself of her worth, of the journey that's brought her here. She is more than her job, more than anyone's narrow judgment. As she returns to his table with the fresh plate, he doesn't thank her. Instead, he simply digs in, chewing with an air of satisfaction, as if he's somehow won a battle she wasn't even fighting. Maya stands there for a moment, watching him, a calm resolve hardening in her eyes. As she walks away, he mutters to himself again, loud enough for others to hear, "People need to know their place. Some folks just aren't meant for more than this." Several customers shift uneasily, their glances sympathetic as they watch Maya carry on, moving from table to table with the same gentle smile she's known for, despite the sting of his words still fresh in her mind. But Maya knows something Officer Mark doesn't. She knows her worth, her strength, and her journey. And though he sees only a waitress, others in this diner see something far more powerful, a woman with grace, dignity, and a heart that rises above the smallness of his judgments. With each step, Maya silently reminds herself of the strength she carries. She's been through worse and has come out stronger every time. And though the night feels heavy, she holds on to the quiet power within her, knowing the moment will come when the truth of who she really is. As the diner buzzes with its usual hum, Maya's co-workers can't help but notice the tension building between her and Officer Mark. Jenny, a fellow waitress and Maya's close friend, catches Maya's eye as she walks past, raising an eyebrow in silent question. Maya offers a small, reassuring smile in return, though the strain behind it is hard to miss. Jenny watches as Officer Mark continues to glance in Maya's direction, with a look of thinly veiled disdain, his gaze following her as if he's waiting for the next opportunity to criticize her. The other staff members are noticing too, exchanging worried glances, and even some of the regulars shift uncomfortably in their seats, their expressions showing a quiet sympathy for Maya. Unable to stay silent, Jenny approaches Maya at the counter while she's preparing another coffee. "Are you okay?" she asks softly, her voice filled with genuine concern. "That guy's been on your case all night." Maya shrugs, offering a calm smile, though it doesn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm fine, Jenny. I've dealt with worse." Her tone is light, as if brushing it off, but Jenny knows her well enough to sense the hurt that lingers beneath her calm exterior. "He has no right to talk to you like that," Jenny mutters, glancing over her shoulder at the cop who is now engrossed in his meal, oblivious to the discomfort he's caused. "You work harder than anyone in this place, and he treats you like... Maya cuts her off gently, placing a hand on her friend's arm. It's okay. I don't want any trouble. Let's just get through the night. Her voice is steady, her resolve clear. She's not about to let one man's prejudice disturb the peace she's worked so hard to maintain. But inside, the words sting. Every rude remark, every dismissive look, it all chips away at her composure, testing her patience. She can feel her coworkers' support, their quiet solidarity giving her strength, but she knows she must stand firm on her own. With a deep breath, Maya pushes the pain aside, returning to the floor with her head held high. No matter what, she reminds herself, she won't let him see her falter. As the evening drifts on, more customers start to pick up on the uncomfortable dynamic between Maya and Officer Mark. A few of them exchange wary glances and soft murmurs ripple through the diner. Maya, moving between tables, can feel their eyes on her, each sympathetic look and supportive smile like a silent message of solidarity. At a corner booth, an older couple, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, watch with growing concern. They're regulars who've come to know and admire Maya over the years, seeing her as part of their extended family. Mrs. Thompson's lips press into a thin line as she hears Officer Mark's mocking tone drift across the room once more. His comments about people knowing their place landing heavily in the air. She whispers to her husband, her tone both protective and indignant. I can't believe he's talking to her like that. Mr. Thompson nods, his face clouded with disapproval. Maya doesn't deserve this. That man has no idea who she is. He leans back, crossing his arms, his gaze fixed on Officer Mark, as if he's willing him to feel the weight of their silent judgment. At another table, a young mother with her daughter looks on, her brows knit in concern. The little girl, too young to fully understand, tugs on her mother's sleeve and asks in a soft voice, Mommy, why is that man being mean to the nice lady? Her mother shushes her gently, but there's a glint of anger in her eyes as she watches Maya continue her work, handling herself with grace despite the tension. Nearby, a group of college students, laughing and chatting moments earlier, fall silent as they pick up on the scene. One of them, a young man with a soft spot for justice, mutters to his friends, This isn't right. She's just doing her job, and he's treating her like she's beneath him. The other students nod in agreement, their cheerful mood dampened as they watch the exchange. A quiet sense of outrage begins to grow among the customers, each person silently rooting for Maya, hoping she'll get through this ordeal without losing her composure. Maya, though feeling the sting of each word from Officer Mark, is bolstered by these quiet acts of support. She catches the eye of Mrs. Thompson, who gives her an encouraging smile, one that seems to say, We see you, and we're with you. It's a small gesture, but it means everything in that moment, reminding Maya that not everyone sees her through the narrow, judgmental lens that Mark does. The atmosphere in the diner shifts subtly, a collective empathy building up in the air. People who normally wouldn't have spoken to each other exchange nods and glances, unified by their shared disapproval of Officer Mark's behavior. He may be the one in uniform, a figure of authority, but tonight, in this small diner, he's the one being silently judged. Maya senses the quiet support surrounding her, a warmth that counters the cold sting of Officer Mark's words. With a deep breath, she straightens her shoulders, her resolve solidifying. She doesn't need to prove herself to him or to anyone else who looks down on her. She's here to do her job, to serve her customers with the same kindness and respect she always has. And though Officer Mark may never understand the strength it takes to remain kind in the face of cruelty, everyone else in that diner sees it, and they admire her all the more for it. As the minutes pass, the tension in the diner thickens, wrapping itself around Maya like a suffocating fog. Officer Mark seems to sense the discomfort in the room, and it only fuels his smug expression. He's a man used to having authority, to commanding respect without question, and he's clearly not accustomed to people reacting to him with anything less than admiration. Yet here he sits, surrounded by silent glares and whispers, with no one openly voicing their opinions, but all sharing the same disapproval. It irks him, though he won't admit it. His response is to dig in deeper, to press harder on the buttons he's learned can bring people down. And Maya, quiet, composed, seemingly meek Maya, is his current target. As she passes by to clear a nearby table, Mark clears his throat loudly, looking her way. I have to say, it must be nice, he starts, his tone laced with sarcasm. Just standing around all day, serving people food. Easy job, no real responsibility. Maya stops, her back straight, yet she keeps her gaze steady on the table she's clearing. She doesn't look at him, doesn't engage, simply focuses on her work. But her silence seems to egg him on, making him more determined to get a reaction. You know, he continues louder now, some of us actually have jobs that matter, jobs with real stakes. Not that I'd expect you to understand that, of course. His words are sharp, each one a jab meant to cut deeper than the last. The customers around him shift in their seats, visibly uncomfortable. A few of them look ready to speak up, but Maya subtly shakes her head as she passes by their tables, her silent plea clear. Let it go. She's used to people underestimating her, dismissing her value based on their own narrow perceptions. And she's learned to rise above it. Tonight will be no different. But Officer Mark doesn't stop there. He leans back in his seat, a mocking smirk spreading across his face. Tell me, do you plan to be a waitress forever? Or is this just a temporary gig while you figure out what you actually want to do with your life? Maya pauses, glancing at him with a polite, restrained smile. Her voice is steady even, though there's a subtle edge to it, a quiet power beneath her words. I enjoy my work, sir, and I believe every job has value. Serving people is something I take pride in. Her response is calm and respectful, but there's a glimmer of defiance in her eyes, a hint that she won't be belittled by anyone, not even a man in uniform. This quiet strength surprises the cop, though he covers it with a scoff, rolling his eyes dismissively. He's about to speak again, another cruel remark on the tip of his tongue, when one of the regulars, Mr. Thompson, suddenly clears his throat loudly, drawing attention. I think you've said quite enough, officer, he says firmly, his voice carrying a calm authority that hushes the murmurs around them. The cop glances at Mr. Thompson, surprise flickering across his face. But before he can respond, Mr. Thompson continues, Maya here is one of the finest people I've met. She treats everyone with respect and kindness, something I think we could all use a little more of. The diner falls silent, each customer watching this unexpected standoff. Officer Mark's face tightens, a flash of anger crossing his features as he shifts uncomfortably in his seat, his bravado momentarily shaken. Maya watches, her heart pounding, touched by the quiet support of her regulars, but she quickly regains her composure, giving Mr. Thompson a grateful smile. Thank you, Mr. Thompson, I appreciate that. Not wanting to let Mr. Thompson's words settle, Mark huffs, shaking his head. Everyone's so sensitive these days, he mutters, half to himself, half to the room. Can't even make an observation without people getting offended. But Maya doesn't respond, choosing instead to carry on with her work, her expression calm, her movements graceful and unbothered. She's learned that some people, no matter how much you try, will never see beyond their own biases. And tonight, her silence, her poise, becomes a statement of its own, more powerful than any rebuttal she could give. The customers around her sense it too. They see the quiet dignity she holds herself with, the strength it takes to remain kind in the face of cruelty, and they admire her all the more for it. The tension in the diner may still be present, but now it's laced with a sense of admiration, a silent respect for Maya that fills the room. As she moves through the diner, carrying plates and refilling coffee cups, the customers offer her subtle smiles, nods of encouragement, their small gestures speaking louder than words. And though Officer Mark continues to watch her with disdain, he's beginning to realize that he's alone in his contempt, a fact that visibly unsettles him. In that moment, Maya's grace shines brighter than any uniform, her strength more powerful than any badge. She is more than just a waitress. She's a beacon of resilience, a reminder that true strength lies in kindness and dignity, no matter the situation. As the night winds on, the tension finally begins to ebb, leaving behind a hushed calm as most of the customers finish their meals and settle their bills. The diner's regulars linger a little longer than usual, sensing that the story between Maya and Officer Mark isn't quite over yet. Mark, however, remains at his seat, tapping his fingers on the counter, irritation still flickering in his eyes as he watches Maya move about with her usual grace. Just as Maya is clearing the counter, the door opens, and in walks an older man, well-dressed and with an air of quiet dignity. He glances around the diner before his gaze lands on Maya. A warm smile lights up his face as he heads over to her, his arms open in an embrace. Maya, there you are. I was hoping I'd catch you before closing time, he says, his voice rich and familiar. The room falls silent as customers and staff alike turn to look at the man, curious and somewhat awestruck by his presence. Maya's face lights up in surprise and joy. Uncle John, it's been ages. She steps forward, hugging him warmly. Her usual composure momentarily gives way to an outpouring of warmth and affection, something rarely seen by her coworkers and customers. Uncle John pulls back slightly, holding her at arm's length as he looks her over, pride evident in his eyes. Look at you, working hard as always. I couldn't be prouder, he says, his voice thick with emotion. Officer Mark, observing the interaction from his seat, arches an eyebrow, a skeptical look on his face. He shifts uncomfortably, sensing the attention being drawn away from him, and clears his throat loudly, hoping to reassert himself. So you know each other? He asks, a slight edge of disdain in his tone. Uncle John turns toward him, his expression calm but with a hint of steel in his gaze. Yes, I do. Maya's my niece, and I couldn't be prouder of her, he replies, his tone polite but firm. She's a remarkable young woman. Officer Mark lets out a scoff. A remarkable woman? She's just a waitress. Nothing special about that. The room goes silent, the weight of his words hanging heavily in the air. But Uncle John's expression doesn't falter. Instead, he takes a deep breath, his gaze never leaving the officer's face. I think it's time you understood something about Maya, he begins, his voice steady and unwavering. Maya isn't just anyone. She has spent years volunteering in shelters, helping disadvantaged youth, and organizing community events. She's not only a wonderful waitress, but an extraordinary person who has touched more lives than you might ever realize. Mark shifts uncomfortably, clearly not expecting this response. But Uncle John isn't done. Maya also happens to be one of the top scholarship students in her university. She's been awarded several prestigious honors for her work in social justice and community outreach. Her compassion, her dedication, and her strength inspire everyone around her. She's worked here not because she has to, but because she chooses to. She loves being part of this community, serving people, and giving back. The silence in the room deepens as customers listen, their respect for Maya growing with every word. Her co-workers exchange glances of astonishment, realizing there's so much more to their friend than they'd ever known. Even the regulars, who've always admired her warmth and kindness, are struck by the depth of her story. Officer Mark's face tightens, and he opens his mouth as if to argue. But Uncle John isn't finished. And you, officer, he continues, his tone firm, you walked in here tonight and saw only a waitress. You judged her by the job she does, not by the person she is. You saw a uniform and made assumptions. And I don't blame you for that. We're all guilty of it sometimes. But perhaps tonight is a reminder that the worth of a person isn't defined by what they do to make a living, but by who they are in their heart. Maya, standing quietly beside her uncle, feels a wave of emotions swell within her. Gratitude, pride, and a deep sense of validation. She hadn't expected this moment, hadn't anticipated her uncle's words, but as she stands there, she realizes that her journey, her hard work, and her resilience are all visible, recognized by the people who matter. The cop, visibly embarrassed, looks away, unable to meet Maya's gaze. He fumbles for words, his bravado gone, replaced by a shadow of discomfort. I didn't know, he mumbles, his voice barely above a whisper. Uncle John nods, his expression softening slightly. Maybe this is a moment to reflect, officer. We all have choices to make about how we treat others. Maybe next time, you'll see the person before you see the job. Mark clears his throat, still struggling with his words. I apologize, he finally manages, though his voice lacks its usual confidence. I shouldn't have judged you like that. Maya offers a gentle smile, a forgiving nod that speaks volumes. She's held herself with grace through every harsh word, every dismissive look, and now, standing tall beside her uncle, She feels a sense of peace wash over her. She doesn't need an apology, but accepting it feels like the final piece in closing this chapter of the evening. The customers around them begin to applaud softly, a quiet show of support and respect for Maya. Her heart swells with gratitude as she looks around, meeting the eyes of each person who stood by her in silent solidarity. As the applause fades, Uncle John pulls her into another hug. "I'll be by tomorrow for lunch, okay?" he says with a warm smile. She nods, smiling back. "I'd like that, Uncle John." Thank you. As he leaves, Maya returns to her duties, but something has changed. The weight of Officer Mark's judgment no longer lingers in the air. The customers look at her with newfound admiration, and her co-workers give her gentle pats on the back, quiet words of encouragement. She moves through the diner with renewed strength, her spirit unbroken, her heart filled with the support of those who know her worth. And though the cop finishes his meal in silence, humbled and thoughtful, Maya holds her head high, knowing she's shown everyone exactly who she is, a woman of resilience, compassion, and quiet power. As the evening winds down and the diner begins to clear, Officer Mark finds himself alone at the counter, his earlier confidence replaced by an uncomfortable silence. He stares into his coffee cup, unable to shake the weight of Uncle John's words. For the first time, he's truly seeing Maya, not as a waitress, not as someone beneath him, but as a person with depth, dignity, and an inner strength he had failed to recognize. Maya, in her usual manner, continues to work, wiping down tables and preparing the diner for closing, her calm demeanor unshaken. She's maintained her composure all night, carrying herself with grace despite the cop's hurtful words. Yet there's a warmth in her eyes, a quiet pride that shines through, her strength now visible to everyone around her. Officer Mark clears his throat, his voice hesitant. "Maya," he begins, his tone softer, lacking the arrogance that had colored it earlier. She pauses, turning to face him, her expression polite but guarded, her professionalism unshaken. He looks at her, struggling to find the right words, his usual self-assurance nowhere to be found. I, I want to apologize," he finally says, his gaze dropping to the counter. "I didn't realize, I didn't know all that you've accomplished. I just, I judged you, and that wasn't fair." Maya listens, her face unreadable, yet there's a flicker of empathy in her eyes. She's used to apologies, hollow ones, genuine ones, and everything in between. But something about Mark's tone suggests that he's grappling with his own misconceptions, realizing that he's been blind to the true worth of the people around him. He continues, his voice quieter, almost vulnerable. "I've spent years in this job, thinking I knew people, thinking I could sum them up in a few seconds. But I was wrong. I was wrong about you. I'm sorry." Maya holds his gaze for a moment, letting his words settle. She nods, a gentle smile forming on her face. A smile not of victory or superiority, but of quiet understanding. "Thank you for saying that, officer," she replies softly. "It takes courage to admit when we're wrong." Mark's shoulders relax, a weight lifting from him, and he nods, his gratitude evident. "You're a strong person, Maya," he admits, almost to himself. "I don't think I've met anyone quite like you." She offers a small nod, acknowledging his words but not letting them define her. She's heard many things over the years, both kind and cruel, and she's learned to let each one pass through her, choosing to hold on only to the words that matter. With his apology given, Mark finishes his coffee in silence, the heaviness in the air replaced by a quiet understanding. He glances at her one last time before standing, and though no more words are exchanged, Maya senses a change in him, a shift in perspective, however small. As he leaves, the door closing softly behind him, Maya feels a sense of closure. Tonight has been a reminder of her own strength, her ability to rise above judgment and meet adversity with grace. And though Officer Mark may not understand the full weight of his words, his apology is a step toward something better, a moment of growth in the midst of an otherwise ordinary night. With a deep breath, Maya returns to her duties, her heart light and her spirit undimmed, ready to greet the next day with the same resilience she has always carried within her. As the diner empties out, Maya stands by the counter, taking a moment to breathe. The quiet fills the room, a comforting contrast to the tension that had defined much of the evening. She gazes around, taking in the familiar surroundings, each corner of the diner holding memories of laughter, kindness, and connection. Moments she treasures deeply. Her co-workers gather around her, offering gentle words of support, and a few of the regulars wave their goodbyes, sharing warm smiles as they leave. The silent show of respect fills her with gratitude, grounding her in a sense of belonging that she holds close to her heart. Jenny, her friend and co-worker, approaches, her face reflecting both pride and relief. "You handled yourself with so much grace tonight, Maya," she says, her voice filled with admiration. "I don't know how you do it,